go. So he's into Upanishads class now.
Okay, I know. I just was saying.
No, we will sign off. We saw it, means Darshika posted this.
We've seen it for a few days, and I was telling Ajit, I don't think it's.
Okay, we'll get started.
Madhu and everybody, very sorry, man. Very sorry about the delay because we're just slightly out going to Liverpool. Thank you. Please go on. I've made you host. I made you quite a few people co-host, and I started the recording. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Sudarshan. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yo Antaha Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjivayati Akhila Shakti Daraswadamna Anyamshta Hastacharana Shravanatvagadin Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Lasatu Srimadananda Tirtendurno Hridambare Yadvachas Chandrika Swanta Santapam Vinikrintati Padavakya Pramana Jnan Pranamya Shirasa Gurun Vyakarishye Yata Bodham Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam. So, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. I'm quite happy in the sense that I'm signing in from Bengaluru and talking from India, which I was looking forward to for 2.5 years. So it's anyway good to be back home. So going back to where we left last time. So just wanted to get you all reminded with regards to what we were doing in Katha Upanishad. Just a very brief background because it's been about 3 weeks since we have done the Katha Upanishad. So if you can recall, our friend Nachiketa is in Yamaloka and he has waited for 3 days and 3 nights, and Yama finally gives him darshan, and then he gives him 3 boons. The first boon that Nachiketa asks is that his father becomes a good chap and he becomes nice, and then he looks after him well, and he also has a decent life. And the second vara he says is, my dad does all these various Agni sacrifices. I want to know about that Agni sacrifice, which if I do, I go to moksha. So that was the second boon that you will all recall. And the third boon was, and everything is logically connected with each other. And the third boon was, Nachiketa says, once I am in moksha sthiti, once I am in moksha, I want to know about my own state. Do I actually exist? What is my relationship with Brahman? What is this? What is the status of the Supreme Lord in moksha? What is his greatness? So that is what the discussion, that is what our friend Nachiketa actually wants to know from Yama. And as you can recall, we did a number of classes actually discussing about how Yama deflects that question and tempts Nachiketa with various material things. And Nachiketa actually proves himself to be a true adhikari or a mumukshu by actually, rebutting Yama to say that I'm not interested in any of these temporary transitory things, and I'm more interested in that state of permanence, and I want to reach that eternal state. That's what I'm after in my life. I'm not interested in all the transient material things. And at that point, our friend, our guru Yama is very impressed with Nachiketa. And then he starts the discussion. Yeah, so this is what this slide is. So last time when we were talking about Katha Upanishad, we were doing these verses, and I just wanted to remind you about this. What were the verses that we did? Sarve Vedaha yat padamamananti, tapamsi sarvani cha yad vadanti, yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti, tatte padam sangrahena bravimi om ityetat. And again, we spent a lot of time talking about this Omkara Tattva. The next verse was, then Yama goes on to say, yes, this Brahman's shortened name is Om, and this Brahman can be known only through the Vedas. And what is this Brahman? Yetadeva aksharam Brahma, Yetadeva aksharam Param, Yetadeva aksharam Nyatva yo yad ichchati tasya tat. So this Brahman is called Omkara. He is also called Akshara. He is also called Param. So he who knows this Aksharam eventually reaches a state where whatever he desires, he gets. So that's a summary of this verse that we saw last time. Then Yama goes on to celebrate this Brahman as Etad Alambanam Sreshtam, Etad Alambanam Param, Etad Alambanam Nyatva Brahmaloke Mahiyate. So Alambana means he who is the sustainer, he who holds, he who controls, he who is the foundation. That is Alambanam. So he is the highest controller of everything. That is Etad Alambanam Sreshtam. He is Param. He who knows him through his grace eventually goes to Brahmaloka. And again, we had a discussion about what this Brahmaloka can be. It could be the abode of Chaturmukha Brahma, or it could also be that state beyond the material realms of existence to the transempirical realms of Vaikunta. That is also Brahmaloka, because we know is Brahma Shabdashta Vishnaveva. So it's Vishnu Loka. So we also understood that he who knows this Brahman eventually through his grace goes to Vaikunta or Vishnu Loka or Brahma Loka. And the very next verse is again is a logical sequence of that. Yama then reminds Nachiketa that once somebody goes to Brahma Loka or Vaikunta, what is their situation there? And that is described in this verse. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit na ayam kutaschit na babuva kaschit ajaha nityaha shashvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So that describes how in that state of moksha, the jiva never comes back to the samsara state. It never acquires a body. It is always there. It'll be ever there in communion with the Supreme. It is an eternal existence in moksha, is what is described in this verse. And that again we did about 3 weeks ago. And then Yama reminds, look, this state of moksha is different from the state in samsara. What is the state in samsara? Hanta chet manyate hantum, hataschet manyate hatam, ubautau na vijanito, na ayam hanti, na hanyate. So in the material state, what is happening is the jivas have acquired a body. And with our ignorance, we seem to have understood that somebody is killing, somebody is getting killed and all that kind of stuff. But actually that is not what is going on. Although even in the samsara state, the jiva is eternal and the body is perishing, but still there is an ignorance among us folk that in samsara state, we somehow feel that when the body disintegrates, we also disintegrate. But that is not actually our constitutional position. The constitutional position is what was described in the previous verse. But in samsara, we do not know that we are in that state always. Okay? So as soon as that was done, then we discussed these beautiful verses describing these contradictory attributes of the Supreme present simultaneously in a space-time correlation. And what was that? Anoraniyan mahato mahiyan atma asya jantoho nihito guhayam tam akratuhu pashyati vitashokaha dhatu prasadat mahimanam atmanah. So again there we said, looks, he is basically talking about his omnipresence and omnipotence. And then that verse also described to us that dhatu prasadat is very important. Dhatu means what? Data yata purvam akalpayate. We have done that verse in Rig Veda, where the data is essentially the Brahman, is the Supreme. Prasadat means his grace. So dhatu prasadat becomes very important. So when we understand that this guy he's got all this omnipresence, omnipotence, he's got an achintya adbhuta shakti, and we are able to understand that concept and understand how big he is and how exalted he is, then naturally a devotion comes into us. We get that bhakti, the devotion, and the devotion eventually matures to such a situation where the Supreme is impressed with our devotional service, so he sheds his grace. And that is the dhatu prasada. So once that verse is done, then Yama goes to this another beautiful verse, as you know, asino duram rachati shayano yati sarvataha. So he is in one place, but he's simultaneously moving everywhere. He's sitting in one place, he's going everywhere. He's sleeping in one place and he's running around everywhere, all giving that idea of omnipresence of the Supreme, yeah, and the omnipotence of the Supreme, and how we have to understand that omnipresence and omnipotence as an achintya adbhuta shakti of the Supreme. Yeah, so that is a very important concept within the Vedic philosophy of how we understand the Supreme as something that is so wonderful that is beyond human comprehension. So this is where we left last time. So I had to do a 12 minutes, no, 10 minutes of a Simha Avalokana Nyaya, of actually going back and doing a little bit of revision to understand where we are, so that now we can go into today's verse. The today's verse essentially is the continuation. It is the second line of this verse. Asino duram rajati shayano yati sarvataha kastam madamadam devam madanyo nyatum arhati. Okay. So let's see if we can deal with this verse in all its glory. Okay. So hang on, let me get this right. Okay, IT is playing up. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at this. So what does this verse said? It said, Kastam mada madam devam mad anyo nyatum arhati. So to understand this, let's remind ourselves as to what the previous line was. Asino duram rajati shayano yati sarvataha kastam mada madam devam madanyo nyatum arhati. So this achintya adbhuta shakti of, that is the contradictory attributes of the Supreme present simultaneously, that was described in the previous word, in the previous line. Yama now he exhibits his humility and he says, Kastam madamadam devam madanyo nyatum arhati. So what does that mean? So let's split this over. So there is this word, Kastam madamadam devam. So there is this verse, devam. So what is devam? Devam, we have done it many times as to what devam actually means. The English word divine actually comes from the Sanskrit word deva or devam. Devam becomes divine. And there are at least 7 different meanings that are available for our contemplation when we think about devam. Divu kridayam, divu vijigishayam, divu vyavahare, divu dyuti, divu stuti, divu kanti, divu gati. So those are all some of the etymological meanings of devam, and we have done this before. Just to remind you, quick English run through of what this means. Creation, a play, beyond and above all. Everything happens because of him. The light of knowledge and ananda. Sarva shabda vachyatva. Icha, Satya Sankalpa, Sarva Gata, Sarvagnya. So all those ideas should flow through our mind when we talk about Devam. So this Devam, what does he do? He does 2 things for Jivas. He gives Jivas Mada and Amadam. So Madam means there are various meanings of Madam, but one meaning there is Sukha or Ananda. Amadam means dukkha. The opposite of madam is amadam, which is dukkha. So what does this devam gives? He gives either sukha to some jivas, and he also gives them dukkha to the jivas, not because he is partial, but it is because of what the jivas do. They reap what they sow, they reap what they get. So when we go back to our second Valli, you may remember that we had a lot of discussion about Shreyas and Preyas. So those folks who follow the path of Shreyas, and that is a significant minority, for them, this Devam gives Sukha. Whereas those that follow the path of Preyas, eventually they get Dukkha. And why do they get Dukkha? Because they constantly are going in the cycles of samsara, of birth and death, and going through all the turbulence of life. Or some of them make their journey to the Andhatamas and the eternal hells. So he gives them dukkha in the sense that not because he's cruel, but he just gives the jivas what they deserve, yeah, what they are entitled to, or what is their final destination. He gives them because they follow the path of prayers. So again, we have to link it up with what Yama himself has said in the previous Vallis to understand what is this Devam Madam. Okay, the next way of looking at this verse is even more fascinating. And again, that is what is the the interpretation of the Vedas, right? Chadayanti iti chandamsi. So we have to break open the words and do avayava in various ways to get out the meanings of what the Upanishads is saying. So here, if you look at madanyo nyatum arhati. So here, remember, this is a conversation between Yama and Nachiketa. So here Yama is saying, mat anyo nyatum arhati. Who else apart from me actually know about this Brahman? Okay, so that is one way of looking at it. So when we look at this verse that way, what actually it means is, it is not that Yama is egoistic and he's saying, look, who is more knowledgeable than me? No, what Yama is saying is, his Vedic rank is his 12th in the Vedic pantheon. And he is saying to this soul called Nachiketa, among all the humans and jivas, I am very high, I am at the 12th rank. Who will know about this Brahman better than me? Okay. And when you look at it from Nachiketa's perspective, it is Madanyonatum arhati. Yama is saying, you are such a good adhikari. You are such a diligent student. You are a perfect mumukshu. Who else is more deserving than you to know about that Brahman? Okay, so that mad anyo nyatum arhati opens up in two ways. And then there is another internal twist in this verse. Kaha tam mad anyo nyatum arhati. So kastam mada madam. Look at that word. Kastam. Kastam. Kaha, there can be who else, or kaha in Vedic philosophy also means something else. And we will spend a minute talking about it. So kaha tam mad anyo nyatum arhati. So here when you take this mad anyo nyatum arhati, Yama then says, I am only 12th in the Vedic pantheon. But beyond me, there are folks who have an increasing clarity about the knowledge of the Supreme. And who are those folks? Kaha. Okay, so in the Egyptian mythology, in the Egyptian gods, you have gods like Kaha and Ra and so on. They are all Egyptian gods. So the word Kaha actually comes from the Sanskrit. It's an archaic Vedic word, Kaha. Kaha in Vedic philosophy is a name for Chaturmukha Brahma. It is a name for Mukhya Prana or Vayu. Even Daksha Prajapati is called as Kaha in Vedic philosophy. So here Yama is saying, so I got this graph, I got this table for you, of course. You can see Surya, Chandra, Yama, Shataputras, they're all ranked 12. Whereas Daksha Prajapati is ranked 10. Chaturmukha and Vayu are ranked number 3. So Yama is in rank 12. So although he says, who else can give more knowledge about Brahman than me, he immediately qualifies, but actually what, I am only 12th rank. Kaha, Chaturmukha and Vayu, they know more about Brahman than me. Okay. So when we look at the verse in those kind of angles, I hope you are able to capture additional ideas, because this ideas about the Vedic pantheon is discussed quite a lot in the third valli of the first adhyaya of Katha Upanishad, as we will see in the subsequent verses. And I just want to introduce you this concept of devatas, okay? So I'm going to pause for a minute and have a sip of water. So I'm going to ask you to contribute here. So what is the view of Vedic philosophy? Do we believe in crores of God, or we believe in one God and other highly exalted sentient beings? So who wants to take that one? Shall I pick somebody, or do you want to just, do you want me to get going?
We've discussed this, isn't it? It's one God and the other exalted beings with portfolios.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deval. So that's the perfect answer. So again, when we read Katha Upanishad, we get very, very clear views of what Yama is taking. Yama himself is an exalted Devata. So this is what we need to understand. If some folks from other religions tell us, oh, about you got hundreds of temples, you got hundreds of gods that you all worship, and we have to be very forceful, and we should have our background to explain to them, to say that, look, in Vedic philosophies, there are a number of Devatas, exalted sentient beings, but there is only one Deva. Yeko Devaha Sarva Bhuteshu Gudaha Sarva Vyapi Sarva Bhutantaratma, and so on, is what? Shvetashvatara Upanishad tell us very clearly that there are multiple devatas, but there is only one devam. And that is exactly what Yama is bringing home those ideas to us. Okay. So moving on to the next verse. So the next verse is again, as usual, a beautiful verse. So remember, he has now talked about the Achintya Adbhuta Shakti of the Lord. And then he has said that the clarity of knowledge of the greatness of the Supreme increases in clarity as you climb up the Vedic pantheon. Yama knows good, Chaturmukha and Vayu know it the best among all the jivas. So that we understand. Then Yama immediately what he does is he brings back and carries on celebrating the greatness of the Supreme. And he says, so who is that Supreme? He again reminds us, Shariram, Ashariram. So, sorry, hang on. Let me just get this one. Yes, this is better. Shariram Sharireshu Anavasteshu Avastitam Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam Matva Dhiro Nasochati. So he now tells who is this great being who is there out in Brahmanda, but that the same being is actually in the Pindanda, in you. So this is the beauty of our Upanishads, because the moment they talk about Brahmanda, they immediately bring into Pindanda, talk about this Brahman inside our body. How do we contemplate the supreme being in our body? So Yama immediately goes, Shariram, Ashariram, Sharireshu, Anavasteshu, Avastitam. Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam Matva Dhiro Na Sochati. Let's look at the first line. Shariram, Ashariram, Sharireshu. Okay. Ashariram. So Sharira is what? Sharira is an easy word for us all. Yeah. Sharira is this body, this material body that we have is our Sharira. But Yama says that Brahman is Ashariram. So who is going to answer that small little quiz? Why has Yama said that Brahman is Ashariram, but we are all having Shariras? So what is the idea there of Yama there? Anybody wants to contribute there? Okay, so Sharira there, when you think about Sharira, our body, it means material body. Okay, so when I have a Sharira, that is material body, that is made up of the three Sattva, Rajas, Tamo gunas, made us of Panchabhutas, etc. So that is the Sharira that you and I, we have. But Yama says that Brahman is Ashariram. That Ashariram there means that he does not have a material body, number one. Number two, he does not have a body in the sense he and his non-material being are the same. For us, we are jivas, and then we have a covering we call as a body. But for him, he has his own Sharira, and his Sharira is beyond matter. So it is a non-material Sharira. So he is Ashariram. We are Shariras, but this Ashariram is inside the Sharira. So that is the idea there. Anavasteshu Avastitam. So this Sharira of ours, this Sharira that we have is Anavastam, Anavasteshu. Anavasteshu means what? Unstable. Yeah. Anavasteshu means it is just unstable. It is it's constantly changing. That is the literal word Anavasteshu. But Avastitam, he is inside this moving, unstable body and makes it a living thing. Yeah. So that is the idea there. Shariram Sharireshu, Anavasteshu, Avastitam. So this is the same idea that we know from Gita chapter 15, first verse. So who wants to take up the first verse of chapter 15, that topic about Anavasteshu and how that links up with what 15.1 tells us about? So who wants to take this up? Pragnesh.
So just reciting. Urdhva Mula Mada Shakam Aswastram Prahuryayam Chandansi Yashya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit.
Thank you very much, Pragnesh. You beautifully recited. So Urdhva Moolam Adaha Shakam Ashwattam. Yeah, so Krishna has described this material universe as Ashwattham, that which is temporary, that which is constantly changing, is given that description. So whenever we talk about this material Brahmanda, we should think about the Pindanda. So this Pindanda is also Ashwattha. It is not a permanent thing. It is constantly changing, which is what Anavasteshu literally means. And this Brahman is inside that Anavasteshu Shariram. He gives them their stability. So avasthitam means what? He is inside this sharira, which is anavasteshu, but it gives it some purpose, it gives it some stability. Okay, so this is interesting, and I just wanted to put this cartoon here to illustrate a point. And this again comes quite regularly in Vedic scriptures: sharira, shariri, shari, raka. Yeah, so just remember these words. Sharira means body. Shariri means he who is inside this body. So I've got this figure here. Sharira is this body. The thymus gland is part of the body. Shariri is the jiva who is inside the body. Shariraka means he who is inside the jiva. Yeah. He who is inside the jiva is called Shariraka. Who is that? Who is inside the jiva? Antaryamin or Paramatma or Brahman or whatever we call is the Shariraka. And that is the reason why Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra, that is so highly celebrated as the top among the threefold foundations that we have in Vedic philosophy, is called Shariraka Sutra. It is used to be called as Shariraka Sutra because it talks only about the Antaryamin. This is a key point. Yeah, Shariraka Sutra or Brahma Sutra only talks about the greatness of Brahman and nothing else. Yeah. So Sharira, Shariri, Shariraka. Then you can link it up with Ashariram, Sharireshu, Anavasteshu, Avasthitam. And then our Yama goes on to describe Mahantam. Who is this person who is holding this unstable body? He is Mahantam, Vibhum, Atmanam, Matva Dhiro Nasochati. So let us look at the first half of this, which is philosophically quite pregnant with ideas. So this Antaryamin who is inside the jiva, he is Mahantam. Mahantam is easy. He's a great being. He is an amazing being. He is the Akshara. He is the supreme Purushottama. All those ideas come in when we talk about Mahantam. Vibhum. So Vibhum, so we have the Vibhuti Adhyaya, Vibhuti Yoga, isn't it, of Gita? So Vibhu, one meaning of Vibhu is all pervasive. Another meaning of Vibhu, and again, as we all know, Sanskrit has got so many different meanings. Another meaning of Vibhu is Vivido Bhavati. So this is an important idea, because if you go to the previous line, Yama has said Ashariram, Sharireshu, Anavasteshu, Avasthitam, saying that he is inside the jiva. And how is he inside the jiva? How is he inside the jiva? As Vibhum, Vivido Bhavati. So our Supreme Lord, in his Bimba form, he's got infinite forms and he is in infinite jivas in infinite forms. So Vivido Bhavati there means he is the Bimba Rupa Paramatma. And we know our jivas are the Pratibimbas. So that idea we get. This Vibhum, this Vivido Bhavati, Atmanam, such a great being, is inside me as my Antaryamin or Swami. So Atma has got various meanings, isn't it? Atman, we have done it 100 times, or rather 1,000 times. So who is going to now explain to us what is the meaning of Atma? So who is going to explain to us the various meanings of Atma here? You've done it a few times. Go for it. Volunteers, please. What is our understanding of the word Atma?
I think one meaning is it is jiva.
Yeah.
It is the living embodiment in the shariri, as you just explained. The other is it's also the sharira, as in when you do Atmahatya.
Yeah.
And it is also in the context that is used is the Paramatma.
Yeah, Wonderful, Deval. Yeah, absolutely right. So we have to take it in context. Yeah. So here, when you say Mahantam, Vibhum, Atmanam, then Yama clearly is talking about this. Paramatma is the Atma. And the etymology of Atma when it comes to Paramatma, of course, is many. So there are Atatatvat Atma, Apnoti iti Atma, Adatte iti Atma, Atti iti Atma, Atma is my Swami. So there are all those meanings. So Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad gives the conclusive definition of what Atma primarily is meant in the Upanishad. Yeah. So there are lots of views there, of a lot of contradictory views around when the Upanishads talk about Atma. Who is that Upanishad referring to? Is the Upanishads referring to the Jiva or the Upanishads referring to Brahman? So the key evidence for folks who have a difference of views there is Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Those who think that it is the Jiva who is described in the Upanishads are fundamentally wrong. The reason being, Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad clearly mentions this. Yaha sarveshu bhuteshu tishtan sarvebhyo bhutebhyo antaro yam sarvani bhutani na viduhu asya sarvani bhutani shariram yaha sarvani bhutani antaro yamayati yeshata atma antaryami amrutaha. Yeah. So people should not forget these critical verses of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which clinches the argument as to wherever you see the word Atma that comes in the Upanishad verse, primarily it denotes only Antaryami Paramatma. Jivas could be secondary, but primary meaning is Atma. So why again in this verse, if you look at the contextual relevance, if you look at the Prakarana, Mahantam, Vibhum, Atmanam. So he who knows this Antaryami Paramatma, that is the next word, Matva. He who knows this Antaryami Paramatma, he is called what? Dhiraha. Dhiraha is what? He who is very knowledgeable. Drira, he is firmly fixed in knowledge. He who knows this Mahantam as his Bimba, as his Antaryaman, as his Swamin, he who knows that person is knowledgeable, and that person then understands that everything is being controlled by the Supreme Being. Therefore, na shochati. Shochati is easy, isn't it? Shochati is he's not afraid, he doesn't suffer, because he knows this Antaryaman is inside him and controlling him. Okay. So in this verse, previous verse, he spoke about the Brahman's greatness in Brahmanda, and slowly our friend, our Guru Yama brings into Pindanda, and from the rest of this verse, it will be talking about only Pindanda. Yeah, it will be talking about how your body needs to operate, etc. There are some beautiful, amazing verses that we are going to deal with in subsequent classes. So the key message here is, there is this Pratibimba, which is us as Jivas. And there is this Bimba, which is the Bimba Rupa Paramatma, who is our Antaryamin. And we are dependent on this Antaryamin. And this chap is very close to us. He is not out there in Vaikunta. Yes, he is out there. But Asinaha, Duram Rajati, Asinaha, he is very close to us. He's Shayano Yati Sarvashaha. Shayana, he is right next to us. He's lying there in bliss right next to us. But still what? We are not able to see him. Yama says, Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam Matva Dhiraha, he who knows. But you and I, in our mundane lives, we do not know him. We are not knowing him, are we? He is so close to us, but we do not know him. Can we mortals know him by just studying the scriptures? Is knowledge alone liberating? These are all the questions that come up. So yes, of course, when we read the Katha Upanishad, Yama has said, look, this fellow is inside you. This Brahman is inside you. Just by knowing that fact, can we actually go and see him? Okay, these are all the questions that come up. So he is so close to us, but we do not know him. Can we mortals know him by just studying the scriptures? Is knowledge alone liberating? So those are all the ideas. So I just want to again open up for a couple of minutes to get our own background understanding as to what is the views here within our group. for these 3 questions that I put in this red box. So who wants to go first? Okay, no worries. So we got a bit of a silence there. That means you are still contemplating and thinking about Pragnesh, but yes, go for it.
So Brahman is so close to us, it is within us, but we don't know enough.
We don't know him. Yeah. So the question is, are these 3 points enough? He's so close, but we don't know him. But just knowing that he's close to us, is that sufficient for us to see him? Is the question.
Once we know him, he has to give the grace. Only then we can see him.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pratibhaji. Great answer. So let's go to the next verse. So that is what our Guru Yama is actually taking us. Look at the beauty of Katha Upanishad. Nothing is out of context. Nothing is irrelevant. Everything links up very nicely to the next verse. So here what Yama says is, yes, he is Vibhum, he is Atmanam, he is Mahantam, Dhiro no sochati. He who knows about this will never suffer, i.e. meaning he will eventually attain moksha sthiti, etc., etc. But then he puts a caution here, and he says, next verse again is a very important verse of Katha Upanishad. Some of you may be very familiar with this. So what is that verse? Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya na bahuna shrutena, yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha, tasya yesha atma vivrunute tanun swam. So this is a beautiful verse, definitely worth memorizing. Okay, look at the word Atma again coming here. Atma. Na ayam Atma. So look at the words. Yeah, that is very, very clear. So what is happening here? Yama, who is a Jiva himself, he is an exalted Jiva. And he is teaching Nachiketa, who is also an exalted Jiva. And to Nachiketa, Yama is saying, I am Atma. I am means what? That which is very close to me, that which is right next to me. I am there is something that is very close to me and very, very next to me. That is what he has said in the previous verse, isn't it? Saying that Ashariram Sharireshu Anavasteshu Avastitam Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam, and he has said all this, and then immediately he says, this chap who is very close to me, I am Atma. Okay? This person who is very close to me, inside me as my Antaryamin, Pravachanena na labhyaha. So what does that mean? Pravachana. So Pravachana is an interesting Sanskrit word. So we break it open in our usual traditions of doing our Chintana. Pra plus Vachana. Vachana, let's look at, first let's look at Pravachana in its holistic sense. Pravachana can be 2. Swapravachana, Parapravachana. Okay. So what is Swapravachana? So when you read a scripture, when you read a verse from the Gita, you read from the book, and then inside you're doing manana. You're telling yourself, you're telling that verse within yourself, and you're trying to tell yourself through the process of your mind and your thought, you're teaching yourself and you're getting that firmness of knowledge. Yeah. That is called Swapravachana. So only when you have done your Swapravachana, then you do Parapravachana, which is we both having a conversation now in this satsang, which we've been doing for more than 2 years now. We are having this exchange of ideas and thoughts. So that is called Parapravachana. Okay, so that is the first idea about Pravachana. We should always do Swapravachana and then only even dare to do Parapravachana. Then what is Pravachana then? Pra plus Vachana. Pra, what is pra? Pra can have different meanings. One pra means prakrishta or pratanam or pratamam, or there is also a 4th meaning there. Pra could be a shortened form of para. Who is para? Para is Paramatma. Anything that we talk about Paramatma is Pravachana because it is prakrishta. Because it is Shrestha topic. It is the most important and the most beautiful topic to discuss. And such a Prakrishta Pravachana is coming from where? Pratadam, very first time, where was it described and discussed? In the Vedas. So that topic which is described in the Vedas is Pravachana. And Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti is what our Yama has said already. All the Vedas again talk only about this Paramatma. Yeah. So Pratanam Vachanam equals Pravachana. Then you have Pratamam. So the previous one is called Pratanam. This is Pratamam. So this Pravachana is actually happened between whom? For the very first time, it has happened between Yama and Nachiketa. Now, of course, it is happening among ourselves. But very first time it happened between Yama and Nachiketa. Therefore, Pratamam Vachanam Pravachana. So this is all, these are all the ideas that is compressed in that very word Pravachana, which I hope you find it interesting. The more and more you think about it, the more ideas and the more meanings you can get from that word. So Yama is saying this Pravachana, mate, that you are doing, just Pravachana alone, na labhyaha. Okay. Na ayam Atma, this Atma Antaryamin inside you, you cannot reach him by just doing Pravachana. Labhyaha means attained. Na labhyaha means cannot be attained. Na medaya, na bahuna shrutena. So what you have to do is the labhyaha, you have to put it in individual verses. So when you do that, you will get na ayam Atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya labhyaha, na bahuna shrutena labhyaha. Okay. Na medaya labhyaha. Medaya means, yes, you may have by-hearted the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Just by by-hearting and reciting the Bhagavad Gita, we are not going to attain the Supreme, is what the idea. It doesn't mean that we should not memorize the 700 verses. We should, as a step towards higher purpose, but not as an end to itself. That is the idea here. Just the Medaya alone, you're not going to attain him. Or na bahuna shrutena. What does that shrutena there means is just hearing. So there are folks who would go to various discourses, listen to all sorts of pravachanas. Just by hearing, shrutena means hearing. Yeah. Bahuna shrutena, of hearing a lot of discourses, YouTube channels, what have you, you're not going to attain it. Yeah, that is a caution that Yama is actually telling us. So I want to finish today's talk by actually completing this slide. Yeah. So the key message there is, just by talking, Brahman will not be attained. Just by memorizing, Brahman will not be attained. Just by hearing about him, he will not be attained. So this is an important concept. The next verse is a key concept of Vedic philosophy. And I want to spend the next 10 minutes and close today's session talking about this. Yama immediately says, previously what did he say? Na ayam Atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya, na bahuna shrutena. Then immediately he says, Yam eva yesha vrunute tena labhyaha tasya yesha Atma vivrunute tanun swam. Okay, very, very important. This is the foundation of Sanatana Dharma. This verse is the foundation of Vedic philosophy. And why do I say that? Let me justify this. Yam eva esha. Okay, so look at that word. Yam eva esha. When the word eva comes in the middle of a sentence, it stresses importance. Okay, eva, only there. Yam, this, esha, this God. Okay. Labhyaha, attains, vrunute, chooses. So that person will attain this Supreme only when this Supreme chooses that person. Okay, that is the meaning there. Yam eva esha vrunute tena labhyaha. So vrunute tena is important there. Chooses. He has to choose a person. He, after talking a lot, after memorizing a lot, after hearing a lot, this fellow then goes into this system of devotional service, etc. Then he gets impressed with this fellow. Then this Brahman chooses. Vrunute. When he chooses, then he gives him that aparoksha jnana and then gives him that moksha. Tena labhyaha. Tasya yesha Atma vivrunute. So again see Atma. There again, the Atma word is there, talks about Brahman. Vivrunute means reveals. Tanun Swam, his true divine form to that Jiva who is inside, in whom he is present. He will choose that Jiva to whom he will reveal himself. Okay, so this is a key concept that brings us to the topic of divine grace. Yeah, so this is all very important, and our shastras are very clear. How much ever we learn, it's helpful, but ultimately it should mature into jnana, should become mature into bhakti. Bhakti should enhance jnana, and that jnana bhakti will eventually reach a situation where it will bring in the divine grace, and that divine grace will ultimately give you the real knowledge. What you and I are doing at this point is in that sense, yes, we are doing some contemplation, but this is all still mental, creation. All our jnana is paroksha jnana. Yeah, that word is called paroksha jnana, which is the modification of the mind stuff. But we need to get that knowledge. The Jiva Swarupa itself knows this Bimba Rupa. That is called Aparoksha Jnana. So that's Jnana is what is important. And that will be attained only when we have his grace. Yes, there are so many verses that talk about this. Gita 7:17. Does anybody want to take this verse here? Sheilaji, if you want to do you want to take this 7:17 verse? The first line.
Priyo hi jnanino tyartam aham sacha mama priyaha. Is that
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Shilaji. So that was Priyo hi jnanino atyartam aham sacha mama priyaha. So yes, knowledge is important. It doesn't mean we should not go for blind devotion. Will not take us anywhere is a key message here. Krishna has said in 7:17, I like folks who are very knowledgeable. Knowledge about what? Not about cars. Knowledge about me. Folks who have a knowledge and enjoy knowledge about me, I like them a lot. Okay, and Shvetashvatara Upanishad goes a little further. Knowledge alone is not enough. And how do we get knowledge? We get knowledge from a guru, right? We always get knowledge from, that is Guru Shishya Parampara that is always there. Shvetashvatara Upanishad gives us a clear direction there. It says, Yasya deve para bhaktihi yata deve tata gurav tasya ete katitahi artaha prakashante mahatmanaha. So what does that mean? Yasya deve para bhaktihi yata deve tata gurav. So what that essentially means is, if you have a great admiration to the God, you should first also have a great admiration to your guru, because he is the chap who gives you the knowledge. Without his grace, you don't get the knowledge, and without God's grace, you're not going to get aparoksha jnana. So that grace, that divine grace that talks about, Shvetashvatara Upanishad says that grace comes in two levels. One is the grace from the guru, which is required. Say, for example, the guru of Srimad Acharya is required for us to get the knowledge of the Supreme Brahman. His grace is essential. Yata deve tata guru. When we get the grace of our Acharyas, then we get the grace of the Supreme, who bestows that aparoksha jnana to us. And that's why in Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Acharya says, Yatao Narayanat Prasadat Mrute na mokshaha. Nacha jnanam vina atyartha prasadaha ato brahma jijnasa kartavyaha. So, although our friend Yama has said, na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya na bahuna shutena, yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha, tasyesha atma vivrunute tanun swami, doesn't mean we should just sit in a corner and watch TV and do nothing else and hope that suddenly God will shower his grace upon us. That is not how the system is. We have to work towards this so that we attain his grace. So this concept of divine grace is actually there in all of world religions. It is not unique to Vedic philosophy. And I just want to bring it up here so that most world's religion also, they talk about the same thing, the divine grace in world religions. Theistic Vedanta, yeah, Dvaita and Visishta Dvaita always talk about divine grace as instrumental for liberation. Catholicism is again, divine grace is a key concept in Catholicism. In Judaism, again, divine grace is a key concept. And even in the Islamic faith, divine grace is a key concept for liberation. So all the world theistic religion stress the concept of divine grace for one's own salvation and liberation. The only exception to this philosophy is the Advaita Vedanta, where there isn't a firm concept of divine grace for liberation from samsara to moksha. So it's a fact that we need to be aware of. So there is the theistic Vedantas which talk about divine grace. In Advaita Vedanta, divine grace is actually not required at all. The concept of divine grace, actually in some philosophies, is self-contradictory. In atheistic philosophies, and those philosophies that consider supreme as attributeless. So if something is attributeless, what am I going to praise and talk about that person if there is nothing for me to talk about that person? And that person doesn't have omnipotency or omnipresence as an attribute, or does not have achintya adbhuta shakti as an attribute. What is it that I am going to pray to get that divine grace? I don't. So these are all fundamental facts. So again, we need to be mindful of these ideas of how divine grace is essential in most of the world religions. So I just want to connect and close today's session. What we have done today is we have said, na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya na bahuna shrutena, yam eva esha vrunate tena labhyaha, tasyeisha atma vivrunute tanun swam. But then the same Yama, in the 14th verse of the second Valli, he said, Sarve Vedaha yat padamamananti, tapamsi sarvani cha yad vadanti, yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti, tatte padam sangrahena bravimi, om ityetat, he has said. He said, the whole of the Vedas only celebrate me. But then he said, now ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha. Just doing pravachana about this Veda will not give you. No, it is not contradictory. We just need to connect this and understand all the Vedas only celebrate about him. So when we have that knowledge and we do pravachana, or we memorize the Vedas, or we hear those Vedic mantras that celebrate the Brahman, it should increase our knowledge, and the knowledge should increase our bhakti, and the jnana bhakti together should eventually mature into sublime devotion, which will eventually shed the divine grace on us, which then gives us the aparoksha jnana, which is ultimately leads us to moksha. This is the journey of souls, which we have done on a number of occasions. But in these two verses, Yama beautifully summarizes the summum bonum of Vedic philosophy. Okay? So, having given this idea, what Yama will do in the next class is to attain his divine grace. What are the requirements? What are the eligibilities? And he talks about this in the very next verse. Okay. So what I want to do today is I want to close today's session with these two beautiful mantras, and we'll take up any Q&As we may have for a couple of minutes, and we can close this session. So on that note, I am going to close my session today. Thank you so much for listening to me. Sri Krishna Pranamastu. We'll take up any Q&As, and I look forward to carrying on with this discussion from Nottingham next Sunday. So any questions?
Madhu, did you say that the divine grace is not mentioned in the Dvaita Vedanta?
No, I said divine grace is critical for Dvaita and Visishta Dvaita, but divine grace is not required in Advaita. Okay. Knowledge alone is liberating in Advaita. Yeah, knowledge alone. Yeah, knowledge alone is liberating in Advaita, whereas knowledge is a prerequisite for devotional service in Dvaita and Visishta Dvaita. So those are all the differences. And of course, the philosophers debate about this. How can knowledge be liberating? Knowledge is a jada. Okay? Knowledge as an entity is an insentient thing. So you need to think about this idea. So philosophers debate, how can knowledge alone be liberating? Because knowledge is an insentient thing. It is a jada. Behind knowledge has to be a sentient being which should make it happen. So those are all the arguments. So that is not our forum for discussion, but it is clear from Vedantic philosophy, Dvaita and Visishta Dvaita they give importance to divine grace. And in fact, in Visishtadvaita, there is also a concept of prapatti. Okay, in Visishtadvaita, which has a different color in Dvaita, but both prapatti and divine grace are not requirements for Advaita Veda. I hope that answers your question, Sudarshan.
Yeah, it's very clear. Thank you.
Namaste, Madhusudanji.
Hi.
So, hi. So you touched upon Swapravachana. So I just wanted to know what's the difference in Swapravachana and Swadhyaya?
Yeah, a very good question, Jagdish. They are pretty much the same. Swadhyaya Pravachanecha. So if you look at that word, that mantra in Taittiriya Upanishad, and it says Swadhyaya Pravachanecha. Swa, there when I say Swa Pravachana, I've just abbreviated it. Swa Adhyaya. Swadhyaya Pravachana. Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
So it's very similar. So it's
Similar.
Swadhyaya
It's
and
just when I say
Swapravachana.
when I say Swa Pravachana, I've just not put Swa Adhyaya Pravachana. So that's how it should be.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jagdish. Brilliant. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm going to call upon one of us.
Madhu, 1 minute. I just need to make a point. I think there has been a bit of a divine grace for all of us. That's why we are all together in this class in the past 2.5 years. Otherwise, I don't think we would have met, isn't it? I mean, we would have met personally, but a lot of other people.
Absolutely agree, Sudarshan. Divine grace is required for everything, and even for do pravachana. Absolutely, yes. And thank you for reminding us of all that, Sudarshan. So on that note, Sudarshan, do you want to recite Om and we can close today's session?
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, thank you. Oh. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. See you next week. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, Madhu.
Bye.